Hey everybody, and it's the tiniest one back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Threadripper 2, so second generation Threadripper 2920X and the 2970WX. So we've got one down the more kind of cross grey area end of the market, which is the 20X, which is going to come in at $649, and then we've got the one that's more for content creators, so people that are going to be doing 3D rendering and very intense workloads. The 2970X WX, sorry, workstation extreme, that sort of idea, and that's going to be $1,299. Technically, I'm filming this at the end of the video, but one of the things that I want to say straight from the beginning is this is going to be the first time that I'm going to be doing a YouTube premiere. So I'm going to say straight from the start that if you're going on to, you're going to tune in and watch it on YouTube, don't forget you can go onto the Overclock 3D website where we've got loads more graphs, all of the extra testing. There's loads more information there if you want it and you're actually interested in quite how good these are. Okay, so we're going to try and get through this thick and fast. Pretty much the boxes, well not pretty much, the boxes are exactly the same as the 2950X and the 2990WX. Some people think it's getting a little bit extravagant spending money on boxes, but there are options out there at the e-tailers and retailers that if you don't want to buy a retail one, you can buy one that will just be a plain CPU, and that comes as, they call it OEM basically, because some of the processors do come in trays, and when the e-tailers buy them and the system integrators buy them, they don't all buy them in retail boxes, they come in big trays. So if you don't want one of these, you don't have to be a whingy reviewer and go on and on and on about it, because there are options to get around it. It's a little bit cheaper. You do need to kind of go careful and read into the warranty specifications, but those options are out there. The reason why they're not in is we've literally, I've not stripped the test rig, which is in the other room, and for the test rig I used the ML360 TR4 cooler from Cooler Master, and I do that so when we do the overclocking we don't run into any thermal issues at all. I actually used ML Corsair fans on there as well. So it does just give you a kind of a bit of an idea, but we will talk about air cooling as well. Now, one of the things is the difference with the two coolers now. We've got one with 12 cores and 24 threads, and then the other one's got 24 cores and 48 threads. So the 2920WX has a base clock of 3.5 gigahertz and then a maximum single core boost of 4.3 gigahertz. The 24 core and 48 core version, which is the 2970WX, is a 3-core base with a maximum 4.2 gigahertz single core boost. On the normal X you get 32 megabyte of L3 cache, whereas on the WX you get 64 megabyte of L3 cache. Now some people have been saying and kind of hinting, because of the core count on these, easily divisible by 3, that there was and there has been chatter about it being a 6 die unit, whereas the original Threadripper 2s that we saw were very easily divisible by 4, although these technically can be, but that was definitely a 4 die, but then with 2 CCXs in each. So a CCX would have 8 cores, 4 cores, so 4, 8, so you'll have 8 in that, and then add it all up, and then you get up to a maximum of 32 cores in total. Now, because of the way these were split, people were hinting about there being a possibility of it being a 6 die. Now, I've asked AMD a lot of questions about, you know, how they devised and all that sort of stuff, but these are based on the original ones. Now, they're based on the original ones, and when you think about what they're doing, is they wouldn't necessarily bring out a 6-core part on this, because what these essentially are is they're speed binned units. The processors are all pretty much the same, and then I would assume that they just turn bits off, although they do kind of say that no, they're made in this specific way. But if they, it would make a lot more sense to me that they make the CPUs, and there's always going to be parts of the silicon that aren't going to be up to grade, so they can just turn those bits of silicon off and then they speed binned out, and that's pretty much the way all processors are done nowadays. And we had these conversations with the original Threadrippers and stuff like that. But anyway, it is 4-die, but there's been no clarification. I have to say, on my part, as a reviewer's part, that the information that we actually got from AMD this time was a bit light. There was one video, we didn't get any like PDFs explaining anything. It was very, very light. So it was pretty much a look at the old Threadripper, that's what it is. So that's kind of what we have to do with these. Now the thing with these is where you do have that X part at $649, I don't know a GBP price yet at the time of filming. I'm actually filming on a Sunday and the NDA is on the Monday. I don't know any GBP prices yet, but they're both extremely kind of aggressively priced, and that's something I do definitely want to cover in depth in the conclusion. Now I know some of you are going to be wondering about this. It is a technically an unreleased case. I'm not allowed to review it until the day after the NDA. It's the Cooler Master SL600, but we have got a Threadripper system going in this. And the CPU that is in it is the 2970WX. So you're going to be getting to see some more stuff with this and that case and stuff going forward. And there's quite a few little bits and bobs, but this is actually a system that's going to be getting used by me in the office. So it's quite, you know, we will cover lots of this stuff. Anyway, so when we start to test, one of the things I will say straight away, because of some of the stuff that's come up in the past, when I do my stock tests, the way I do my stock tests is I just enable DOCP with 3200 megahertz memory, and then I don't touch anything else in the BIOS. I don't touch any of the precision boost stuff. I do not make any changes, and I use the Zenith Extreme literally with the most updated BIOS on the website as of about a week ago. I can't remember the number of it. And that's the way I test it. The reason why I use the Zenith and not the Meg Creation, which is in here, is I tested both of the original CPUs on the Zenith. So I want to be able to make it directly comparable. So that's the reason why I've done it. When we do the overclocking side of things, I have done a precision boost overclock, which just meant that I just go into Ryzen Master and get the best possible score out of precision boost. And then I also do a manual overclock as well. But if I do a manual overclock, I still go and turn all of the precision boost stuff up to the hilt, just to make sure that I don't get any power issues and any possible down cores. So the essential thing about it is, with the precision boost overclock, I get the absolute best performance out of it that I possibly can do with precision boost. And then when I go to a manual overclock, forcing all the cores to a maximum clock speed, I also focus on that being that as well, and making sure that I'm not getting any core drops. It's all about trying to get the best possible results out of it, because that's meant to be the point in pushing things forward as much as I can do. Now, we will talk about overclocking. So precision boost, it's just a case of opening the taps and letting it do what it wants to do. And that's really a kind of a simple thing. With some of the boards, what you may find, depending on the boards that you use, if you open certain parts of precision boost up too much, it may do an instant power down, and that's normally it tripping an overcurrent protection. You can go in and disable those. It's just a safety feature. You can go in and turn those settings off. You can enable extra power, sort of above 100%. You can go up to like 140 odd percent. And you can also change the precision boost settings as well, like I said. And by extending those, it's basically a way of telling the board, give it more power. But it then does mean if you are feeding it more power, you may need to keep an eye on keeping the VRM slightly cooler. Now, this isn't going to be something I can imagine that the bulk of you are going to worry about doing, if I'm honest. Precision boost is probably what a great deal of you are going to do, but I'd also think about there's a lot of people that are just not going to bother messing around with them at all and are just going to leave them alone. But I'm just being very clear to make sure it's all out there and I don't have to make a response video because someone starts to question my testing methodology. System power draw. Now, with the system power draw graph up, you can see with the overclock on the 2970WX that it's rather large. That's a full system with just an OCCT bench running, so it's CPU based. Now, the reason why it's pulling a fair bit of wattage is because I've got all of those taps undone to let as much power at the CPU as it wants. by turning the dial to 11, it doesn't mean that the CPU is going to constantly use 641 watts. That's just a worst case scenario when running OCCT. So when you're not doing anything, it'll be using the same power as it would have been without an overclock running, down low, and it will just be sipping at the power. That's why when you buy a 1,000 watt power supply, it's not continuously pulling 1,000 watts from the wall. It's the same sort of thing. Again, I'm explaining all these points because I just want to make sure that I have verbalized them all and I don't have to worry about things too much. But anyway, at stock, you can see both the CPUs run about where we would expect, to be honest. But if you have a look there, what you can see is the 2920X, even though it's got 4 more cores, yes, it's running a little bit slower, but it's pulling around the same sort of power as a big overclocked 9900K. So I don't see any issues with these power ratings at all. The 2970WX at the top sits around where I would have expected it to personally, based on the core count and the numbers that I had previously from the other ones. Yes, they can be a little bit power hungry, but adding the extra cores on means that normally, they're going to pull a little bit more power. So I have no issues with this. CPU temperature testing. Now, as I did say to you, I was using the Cooler Master, and it was the ML360 TR4 cooler. Now, I did that so when I was running the overclocks, I wasn't going to be running into any issues. Now, what I did do with that is I run that off the CPU header, and I was literally using it with a performance fan mode setting for both stock and overclock. So as the temperatures go up, the fan's been up a little bit more. It's just the easiest and the cleanest way that you can do it. One of the things I would say for both processes, unless you're doing a full-blown manual overclock, although to be honest with you, with the 2920X, you could get away with using a meaty cooler like the Cooler Master Ryzen Master. These are actually available to purchase now. It did seem to take an age before they hit the market, but both processors at stock and with a mild precision boost overclock as well, you would easily be able to run that off of that air cooler. The WX version, the 70, the air cooler with a manual overclock, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. It will be stretching matters too much and the fan will be blowing an absolute hoolie the second that you start to run a blender or anything like that. So that's, if you're going to go with the 70 and you want to go manual overclock, I'd say get yourself a decent AIO. And to be honest with you, the Cooler Master TR4 one is a really, really nice one. They do the 360, which is my favoured one, but they do a 280 version as well. The 280, you'll probably end up running the fans a little bit more. When you step down to a 240, things start to get to a bit of a grey area for me personally, because the fans will consistently be higher under decent amounts of load, and these processors are pretty much built for heavy mental scenarios. So that's why I say get something bigger and you'll have quite a life in the long run. But otherwise, temperatures, again, about right. The Yes 81 with the 2970WX overclock does sound like a lot, but like I said, we've got 24 cores and 48 threads there. I'm just about to tell you about the overclocks as well. Blowing, you need to be able to cool those off. Now with the overclocks, surprisingly, what we did end up getting was the 70 did a 4 gigahertz overclock. When we got up to 4.05, things started to get a little bit shaky, and we were chasing volts to try and stabilize it, and it just made things a little bit too hot. So in the end, what we did is we settled for a plain 4 gigahertz overclock, which was a similar kind of level that we got to the 2990WX, and we stayed there, and that was happy at around 1.39 volts. With the 2920X though, that one we were actually chasing a 4.2 gigahertz clock. Now, I know a lot of you now are saying, but hang on, one of them was meant to have done 4.3 and one of them was meant to have done 4.2, but that's only a single core. What we are doing is then trying to make all the cores run at the same speed all the time. And because of that, not all cores are going to be as strong, because there's a thing called the silicon lottery. So some of them might want more power than others to be able to run the same sort of clock. So when you think about it, when you've got 24 cores in there, you've got 24 chances, or 23 other chances, that one of them might not be capable of 4.2 or 4.1 for that matter. So it does make things very, very complicated. You actually get to a point of needing to do per core overclocks when you've got this many cores on. So, but we did end up, we were chasing for 4.2 across all of the cores with the 20. And again, we run into issues with just with voltage, really, and the fact that the temps were starting to creep up a little bit. So we ended up going back to 4.15 at the same 1.39 volts. And it was literally, it did, yeah, really well. It was one of the ones where I think it's one of the better of the few, because to be able to get all 12 cores running above 4.1, I was, well, even above 4, I was amazed with. So that's a very strong little CPU. What it also does hint at, and why is my camera battery running out already? That was full up a minute ago. I need new camera battery. So when I move on to my first graph, the reason why I did explain to you about all of the cores and the single thread side of things is the first two graphs, you did need to know that information. So the first graph is a single threaded Cinebench. So this will have been just with the manual overclock. Technically what we're doing is we're stopping it being able to boost as high. So for single threaded applications, a manual overclock isn't that great for these CPUs, because whereas with the bulk of CPUs out there, when you do a manual overclock, you're extending where the base and the boost points would be. With these, we're actually technically kind of hindering them a little bit. So that's why these don't look that great. But then when you flick over to the multi-threaded stuff, where we are pushing them beyond where the multi-core limit would have been, this is why you see a good boost. And because there are so many cores, that's also why the boost is quite large. Because when you're talking about, let's say you're doing a 400 megahertz overclock on 4 cores, you can multiply up. When you're talking about 12 or 24, that's a huge amount of extra megahertz and horsepower available across the, you know, all of those cores. So that's why you can see some pretty decent numbers in this, and quite surprisingly, admittedly the maximum Intel processor I have personally tested has been the 2980XE. You can see here that it does immensely well. Now I looked today, and that is still a £2,000 GBP part, and this these, I mean, look how close even the 2920X with an overclock is, you know, it's up there, you know, giving it a bit of a scare really. And the price difference between the two, that's when it really starts to open itself up as well. Blender, again, massively multi-threaded, absolutely loves every single one of those cores, and you can see for a change, you've got a graph where AMD is absolutely dominant. The gaming side of things, yes, we are only doing 2 games at the moment. It's something that I should be doing a few more of, but they're all changing so much all the time. It's getting a little bit difficult for me to kind of wade through them. But something I will say is when you look at the multi-core stuff, the reason why we're running this, and it's not to show a bad result, it's just to kind of say, if you're going to be Warhammer and the multi-core stuff at the moment just doesn't make any sense. It didn't at the original launch. Before, people were telling me that I'm doing this on purpose or there's stuff wrong. It didn't when I was in Italy with AMD getting this t-shirt, and they were explaining it was funky stuff going on and the game needs work on it anyway. But the reason why I run it was to see if stuff had changed, because all of our apps and everything get updated, and it's still not made a great deal of difference. Now, I'm not saying this because there's anything wrong with the Ryzen processor, the Threadripper processors. It's literally just to kind of say it's a game glitch. It can't cope with all those cores. It doesn't particularly know what it's doing. It's exacerbated when you do a manual overclock for whatever crazy reason. But it does give me a point to kind of say there is a game mode within Ryzen Master that you can flick, and it will make a decent difference with the games. Now, we didn't go in there and do that. Saying that right now, because we didn't do that with the last ones either. So we just left it as it comes out the box. I do have a reason for that, which we'll talk about later on. Excuse me. So, you know, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that was the gaming. And to be honest with you, the way that these processors are, I mean, the 649 20X, oh my days. If you are a content creator on a budget, then that is an absolute, it's a cracker of a CPU. I would kind of question whether it would be worth it for the bulk of people if you were stepping up from like the one of the actual like normal Ryzens, do you know what I mean? So like the 2700X, because obviously it's more than twice the price. You don't necessarily, you're not getting twice the amount of cores as well. This sounds like an argument we could have been having about another brand when you think about it. But you've obviously got more cores in the same package. So you get 4 extra cores over the 2700X. And it's roughly twice the price. But the thing is with the AMD stuff now, for gaming, they openly say in all of their literature and when they do their streams to talk to us about the new technologies and stuff like that, they do say that they're happy with being roughly on par with Intel or a little bit behind. They know then that they're not going to be able to pull in front because clock speeds do make a difference with the bulk of games. And they're like, we're happy with that. But the thing is throwing cores at certain loads, like with things like Blender, decoding, Cinebench, that sort of stuff, when you're using Maya, anything that's massively, massively stressful, and we'll use all of those cores, throwing cores at the problem is the way to go to make a bigger difference. So what they're doing with the Threadripper stuff is, yes, they've gone, yeah, as many on there as possible, because that's what the apps want. That's what the apps need. So by having these 4 Threadripper processors now at a range of price points gives people an option to be able to go in there and this is something I love being able to say, is Threadripper has absolutely blown that market to bits. Because whereas before you would have been looking at spending an absolute fortune on Xeon stuff, them going down the, well, throw cores at it route, but keep the price sensible, has literally, for what I would call the bulk of, if you, there are going to be a lot of server units out there, but that would be an Epic line. That's something that Epic would need to be dealing with. But for content creators, in an office, I already know from when I was in Italy, there's a place in London that have stacks upon stacks of both Epic and Threadripper. I think they run them all remotely as well, I seem to remember. But the price difference between Threadripper and the competing Xeons is so broad, it's genuinely a no-brainer. Because whereas with some other kind of lower end, down ends of the market, especially kind of in the gaming segment, there are arguments for slight performance increases, even though there's a lot more money involved. What Threadripper does is it delivers more performance for less money. It's the holy grail, it's the golden kind of goblet where you get both. You genuinely get better performance, and it's not going to cost you as much. So it does genuinely become a no-brainer. It's also why we're exploring options with using these personally in the OC3D office for me doing my videos. Admittedly, when I make my videos, it all comes down to the way the codecs work, and I've actually been playing around with different codecs to see if I can render slightly faster, although we do end up using GPUs as well. But it's, honest to God, if you're in the market for a Threadripper unit, and you can use them for streaming as well. So the other thing with Threadrippers is sometimes, or the competing Intel product will probably have a higher frames per second in game. But with the amount of frames that it can decode and then stream, the Ryzen, the Threadripper stuff doesn't have such a massive drop off, if at all. So sometimes it will skip frames that it's not being able to transcode in time and send up to Tinternets for people to watch on Twitch, or, you know, however you're going about doing it. Threadripper doesn't have that drop off. So it does come to a point where if you were thinking about, let's say, for argument's sake, you were debating whether you should go for a 2920X or a 9900K. They're roughly about the same sort of price point. And which one should you build for a dedicated streaming rig that you're going to play your games on? You're happy in yourself that you're going to know that you're going to need to stick it on the game mode. You know that you're going to need to get yourself some decent memory going in there and get it set up correctly as well. So get the DOCP running. Play around with precision boost a bit as well if you're brave. Get yourself a decent cooler going on. And what you can essentially end up doing is having a system which will absolutely blow the competition apart at the present moment in time. And you're also going to be, just don't turn into a fanboy is the only thing that I will. Don't go telling everyone that you went Ryzen. Just be happy in knowing that you made that choice for the right reasons and don't become a preacher. But, you know, that 2920X part for that end of the market, I think is an absolute no-brainer. To the point where I would probably personally favour that for the streaming end of the market over the 2950X. And then when you get up into the dedicated content creating, you know what I mean, absolute mind-blowing loads, the 70 and the 90WXs are absolute powerhouses. And I genuinely do mean absolute powerhouses. And if I could get another 90WX, because I need to make sure I've always got that first CPU available to be able to test X399 boards with, this wouldn't be ending up in a, I wouldn't end up with a 24 core because I'd much rather have that 32 core in a system to be getting used in the office. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, AMD. Can I have another 90, please? Because I'd prefer that to be in my system. Thank you very much. Thank you, please. Anyway, so yes, I wonder if the Intel fanboys will now say I'm an AMD shill. Don't know, don't care. It's epic. They're both epic. The 2920 is an absolute gold mine as far as power. I don't even know what the word I should be using, but for the streamer end of the market, oh my god, if you can get someone to help you going with it, that could even mean Sacriel, although I know he's heavily sponsored by Intel, but to be honest with you, he'll end up with the 18 core from Intel. But anyway, I thought I'd mention it. Yes, epic. Well, not epic, it's Threadripper, but you get what I'm saying. Anyway, hopefully I've described and told you all about my testing procedures enough that I'm not going to have to make a follow-up video. But anyway, absolute mind blower, cracker.